Buongiorno a tutti, I am Paolo Sironi, your host of The Banker's Bookshelf. The BBS is a podcast show in which I invite authors of the most interesting books and research papers about the banking present and its fintech future. Now, in today's episode, I have invited two of my best colleagues at the IBM Institute for Business Value for a conversation inspired by their new book, The ROI of Thought Leadership. They are Cindy Anderson and Anthony Marshsall. Cindy, Anthony, welcome to the show.
Very good to be here.
Paolo.
Thank you, Paolo.
So, the Banker's Bookshelf is where we try to share interesting perspectives about the digital transformation, particularly in banking, but also in the overall economy. And thought leadership is a key component of how people make decisions. So the first question for you, which is a ritual question on the BBS, is what is your elevator speech? I did read the book and I recommend it to everyone, but I'd like to hear from you. Why should the audience of the Banker's Bookshelf read it? What makes it different from other books on the topic of thought leadership?
Yeah, Paolo, I think that what makes this book really different is it's the very first time that ROI has been calculated on thought leadership without using estimations, without using assumptions. It's data-backed and it is absolutely validated and authentic research that gives people the confidence that the ROI that we're calculating in the book is for real. Now, most of the people that are going to be interested in this are marketers, and many of your listeners are likely have marketing colleagues. They likely have people they work with who are helping promote the thought leadership within their organization or for themselves, and it's just really powerful for the people who are either thought leaders or who are producing thought leadership are able to calculate their own ROI to validate the importance of that as part of the marketing mix.
So, Anthony.
Paolo, just to add to that, because I started my career in banking, and I was consulting in bank. Two things that bankers really like: numbers and research, right? And this combines both. So it's a numeric valuation of this abstract thing called thought leadership, right? And all banks do research, and research is a major composition of thought leadership. As you know, as our banking leader in the IBV, you're extraordinarily familiar with this, and so this is a huge sweet spot for bankers because it combines the quantitative and the research base.
So, Anthony, I like books written by professionals, and I know how difficult it is to find the time to do that. So you're anchoring it to your experience and Cindy as well. But you guys live in two different countries. I think Cindy's in Singapore, you are in the US, and you guys travel a lot. How could you find the time to, align yourself and do this work?
I think the way that we collaborated together is the way we collaborate just sort of in general, which is anytime one of us has a question, we pick up the phone, we send a Slack, we send an email, and we just ask the question and get it done. And because this was a passion project, it's something that we were both really interested in seeing completed for, both our younger selves, the people who are coming up behind us, and others in the practice of thought leadership. I think it was easier to do that kind of collaboration than it may have been otherwise.
Yes, and I've read the book and I say the passion transpires. So I recommend everybody to be exposed to this passion. Now, let's start from a topic that is about the difference between thought leadership and marketing. You mentioned the marketers could be interested. There is a little line in between the two, right? They are coordinated, but it's not necessarily the same thing. And I know you talk about the 4 Ps of marketing, which is a framework to discuss how marketing value is generated, and you sort of add a 5th P that corresponds to thought leadership. Can you tell the audience what this is about?
Yeah, we actually cut there. So when you study marketing in school, you have the 4 Ps, right? The product, price, place, and promotion. There are 3 other Ps that are people, process, and physical evidence. So depending on where you studied, you might have 4 Ps or 7 Ps. We went with 7 and said we think of thought leadership as the 8th P of marketing. And by that, we mean the platform on which every other marketing tactic and technique should really be built. So we're suggesting that thought leadership, because of the immense ROI that it can deliver for an organization, really should be the marketing platform. And then you build all of your other marketing tactics and techniques on top of a thought leadership platform. Because, thought leadership, again, is so valuable to an organization, and it returns such high, it delivers such high return on investment.
So essentially, they're not two separate things, but one helps the other to resonate because it provides that framework, the platform, that engagement that elevates the conversation to a different level, right? To be very competitive.
They're related, but not the same. So people do, Paolo, have a difficulty distinguishing between content marketing and thought leadership. And I think the very easy way for somebody to determine whether they're talking about content marketing or thought leadership is it data-based? Because thought leadership always is. It's always based on data. And is it independent of any commercial aspect of the enterprise or the activity? If there's any product pitch, if there's any reference to a sale or a service, then it's content marketing and it's not thought leadership.
Truly interesting. And I want to get back to this concept, Cindy, in a moment, because it's relevant to help the audience that consumes a lot of information, especially on social media, to distinguish between what is this and what is that. But before, I want to get back to Anthony, as Anthony mentioned the numbers and the bankers, and the ROI of Thought Leadership is also a formula. Now, we don't have time and space to sketch the formula on the whiteboard, but can you explain which are the key components, the elements that constitute the calculation of the return on investment for the thought leadership?
So I think what we wanted to do, Paolo, is really base it in the truth of what executives are actually telling us, and be as cautious and conservative as possible in the formulation and calculation. Mm-hmm. And so the first question we asked is, do you actually spend on services or products as a direct consequence of consuming thought leadership? We found that 88% of executives, C-suite executives, particularly CEOs, consume thought leadership, and the amount of time that they spend consuming thought leadership is actually growing. When we were surveying during COVID, it was 2 hours a week. It's now more like 3 hours a week. And
so that's an important message. Now, I get CEOs connecting on LinkedIn. So I say, even the CEOs have time and interest to read. So you say 88% of CEOs or senior executives consume thought leadership to, feed their interest.
In fact, Paolo, CEOs have a greater propensity to spend time consuming thought leadership. And you and I go and talk to CEOs and other members of the C-suite. What I often find when I'm talking to CEOs and having really strategic conversations with them is at the end of the conversation, they say to me, I never have the opportunity to talk about these things, and it's so important to me. And that's why they're consuming thought leadership. And so the executives that we surveyed, we said, do you consume thought leadership? And if you do you make spending decisions as a consequence? And they do. And we ask them, how much do you actually spend? And in terms of direct implication, direct spending as a consequence, for a typical organization of, and this was the United States, and we surveyed across 16 different countries, but the typical size of an organization was 29 billion in revenue. A typical organization spends 184 million a year as a direct consequence of consuming thought leadership. And then they also have influence spend. In addition to the direct, what other spending does thought leadership influence in your sort of decision-making framework? And that was another $960 million. Now, when I said we wanted to be conservative and cautious, this direct amount, this 184, we said, absolutely, that's what they tell us, that's real. But what about this indirect or influence? Mm-hmm. Let's only take 5% of that. So let's assume that 95% doesn't happen. Let's just say 5% is realized. Very conservative approximation. So we bring that together, we put that there, and that gives us some of our big numbers in terms of, for a particular organization, what is the impact of the spend? And then we sort of think, okay, well, how many organizations does the executive actually consume from? And we found that that a typical CEO only consumes thought leadership from 5 organizations. And so, are you going to be part of the 5? Are they your clients? What penetration rate will you get? And we sort of had very, very conservative estimates throughout that were based in the data. And we brought that together and were able to do a calculation. And we found that for a thought leadership organization, the return on investment is 156% in terms of investment in thought leadership.
156%.
Yeah, on average. On average. Some are higher, some are going to be lower, but that's the average based on very, very conservative sort of approach to how we came up with those numbers.
I think that's very relevant and interesting. Now, of course, there is thought leadership and thought leadership. You need to do good thought leadership if you want to grab those benefits. I've been doing many things in my career, changing jobs. I was a risk manager. I did a fintech, both by IBM. I joined IBM. I wrote 5 books. And then some years ago, I joined the IBM Institute for Business Value, our family. And I had to learn how to do thought leadership for a corporation. And it took me a while to understand, the principles. I wish I had this book already in my hands back then, but I learned on the way. So now there is a bit of art and a bit of science, both of them at the same time. So can you provide an example of a well-crafted thought leadership that effectively resonates in the market?
Yeah, Paolo, I think before I do that, I would just like to add to what Anthony said a moment ago with the 156% return on investment. The reason that that's so significant is because a typical marketing campaign returns only 9%. So thought leadership is 16. It's going to give an organization a 16 times greater return than a typical. And that's why we say that we believe thought leadership should be the platform. That's
you really caught me off guard here. 9 to 156. That's called the spread in banking.
Yeah, exactly. That's why Anthony said the bankers really like the numbers, right? So as far as what a piece of quality thought leadership would entail, a high quality, we identify 3 categories of kind of production. One is quality, and that really has to do with the data. One is uniqueness, and that really has to do with the point of view. And one is reach, which has to do with, how well are you enabling people in your network and your ecosystem to get the thought leadership into the hands of the executives so they can read it, they can spend their 3 hours a week reading it, and then in turn make business decisions based on that. So those are the 3 categories that we define based on the research as to what produces or what qualities are needed to produce really, high level thought leadership.
That's good. The 3 good pillars. It is a disciplined exercise that can be replicated, right? Paper by paper, study by study, and those needs to be well represented. Now, the audience of the Banker's Bookshelf is made of a variety of individuals, among which a lot of people that are influencers on social media, they speak at conferences, they write books themselves, and they're all curious, I know, because they told me when they heard that we would have recorded this episode, to learn more about the ROI of Thought Leadership book. And in the book, you sort of talk about them because you identify a set of persona, was it 8 or 10 different persona that correspond to different ways of looking at the thought leadership or engaging with a community. Some doing something good, some doing something limited or bad, but in the end, you come up with a sort of good mix, okay, that should be the best of breed in terms of making thought leadership, making it stand out for what it is. Can you tell us about this persona?
Sure. And none of these are necessarily good or bad. They just sort of are within this frame that Cindy, and some of them have titles and names that were a little bit controversial, but that will just be interesting for people. There is no value judgment here. It's a safe space for us.
Everyone has his own market and goal to optimize, right? Anyway, right? But overall, right, we need to distinguish them. So everybody will look at themselves and through this persona and reflect about where they are and how they can further improve.
So within this frame that Cindy just outlined of quality, uniqueness, and reach, because you need all of those characteristics if you're going to have impact. And remember, this isn't just about a piece of research. This is about the impact that you're having. That's how you get the ROI. So the first type is if you're low on quality and uniqueness and reach, we call that a thought leadership novice. Basically you're starting off. And like I said, nothing is bad. You're starting to build your skills. That's a good thing. The second, if you've got quality, but you don't have uniqueness and reach, we call that a thought leadership academic. So good at what you do, producing reports. Maybe no one will ever read them, but they're producing high quality, got data, all this good stuff. If you've got quality and uniqueness, but you've got no reach, we call this the narcissist, right? Because it's not great quality and no one's ever going to read it, but you're really happy producing it and it's got a unique point of view potentially. So it's sort of like you're talking to yourself and maybe 5 close friends, right? If you've got quality and uniqueness, if you don't have quality and you don't have uniqueness, but you do have reach, then we call that an influencer, right? Now, you've got different types of it. This is why it's no value judgment here. You were talking about influence. We're not saying influencer is a bad thing, all right? But influencer is even better if you've got high quality stuff that you're influencing about, right? But we call that sort of quality and uniqueness you don't have, but you've got reach, influencer. If you've got quality, and you started seeing the theme here, where you're looking at different combinations. And so if you've got quality and uniqueness, but no reach, we call that a nomad. So you've got good quality and you've got a unique point of view, but you're struggling to get your message out. It's a nomad. You're sort of wandering through alone. And if anyone ever talks to you, they're impressed, but they're not really talking to you. Then you've got what we call a pioneer, and they've got quality and reach, but they don't really have a unique point of view. So, we would use this debate we have sometimes. Is that thought leadership or is that thought followship? All right. So you're just having something that everyone else has said. Mm-hmm. We call that a sort of a pioneer. If you have no quality, if you're lousy quality, but uniqueness and reach, we call that a pretender. And in order to not be a pretender, you got to get better at your quality. And a superhero, which is the stuff that you produce, Paolo, and that is you've got quality and you've got uniqueness and you've got reach, you've got everything happening, and you're our superhero persona right here.
Okay, guys, this is very flattering. Now, I joined the IBM Institute for Business Value 4 years ago. I was a Padawan. Okay. And here I have 2 Jedi, Anthony Marshsall and Cindy Anderson. And now I'm hearing that I'm qualifying to be a Jedi myself. Thank you very much. But it's very interesting. I really enjoyed reading this persona and looking at what I'm reading on social media through this lens of product uniqueness and reach. So I invite everyone in the audience to get the book, whether you produce content or you consume content, because it changes the way you do it or the way you read it. Now, where can people find the book or find yourself if you have already presentations starting from May onward?
Yeah, we're both available on LinkedIn. Anybody can connect with us. The book is available by Amazon or your favorite online bookstore. If you happen to live in Singapore, it's actually also in a bookstore in Singapore called Kinokuniya. And we'd love to have people head over to the bookstore and grab a copy.
Anthony, I also know that you guys launched a Center for Thought Leadership. Maybe the chance for a little advertisement here that's important.
Absolutely. So as we were developing the book, which took several years because while we were writing it, generative AI happened in the middle of it. And so we sort of paused, and then we wanted to do more surveying and sort of think more deeply about the impact and influence of generative AI on thought leadership. So that's in there as well in the book. But we also recognize that there's an absolute need for community to build capability across the board in thought leadership. And so rather than making that a commercial endeavor, we approached a nonprofit, APQC, which is a nonprofit that's been around for about 40 years, and it started the open standard on performance measurement. And so the open standard performance measurement benchmarking is APQC. We approached them and said, we think it would be great to establish a global thought leadership institute of organizations to build standards and certifications around thought leadership. And they agreed. And about 8 months ago, they set up the Global Thought Leadership Institute. We had a symposium a month or so ago. There is a board of advisors, of which we're part, but also McKinsey and Accenture and EY and KPMG and others are on that board. and we've got others that are about to join to really build up the community. So if anyone, particularly if you're in an organization, even an individual that's interested in learning more about that, we would be delighted to share that in addition to talk about the book.
So now let me conclude saying that, as you said, the P is platform. Thought Leadership is a platform. This book is the explanation of how the platforms work, and the Global Thought Leadership Center is where the minds gather on the platform to share those good ideas. So the ROI of Thought Leadership is a banker's bookshelf recommendation for everyone who wants to understand how business research can help financial institutions to navigate the thought leadership world and make the best informed business decisions. I invite you all to stay tuned for more conversations with book authors and researchers. Don't forget to subscribe to the Banker's Bookshelf to get notified about the new episodes. We stream on your preferred platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, and YouTube. Thank you, Cindy and Anthony, for joining this conversation. Arrivederci a tutti and enjoy the jingle.